Good evening and welcome. Welcome back, actually, to the second part of our series on reincarnation. I find when I speak about reincarnation, people do tend to come back a second time. Thank you. Thanks so much. Third time, but that's it. So if it's a bit freaky to think of the idea that a soul can live in this world, leave this world and come back again in another form, in another person, to the point where the loved ones that we lose, that pass away, might actually be sitting right next to us in another body. Or the souls that we miss may have come back in the next generation. If that's freaky, so what's even more freaky than that is the idea that a soul could come back in a non-human form. That the souls that lived once could live again, but not as a person, but as an animal, or a plant, or even a mineral. And so, as mind-boggling as it is to think that you're having a conversation with somebody who maybe in a previous life you were brothers or sisters or husband or wife or best friends or at worst enemies, and your conversation now is fixing something from the past. Okay, that boggles the mind. But to think that what about my lunch? What about the animals that run past me in the street? What about the rock that I'm standing on? That could have a soul in it, a human soul, reincarnated in non-human form. That is really freaky. And that opens up a whole new level of possibilities, of meaning and connection, when we think that souls come back not only in human form, but in other life forms as well. We briefly touched upon it last week, but today we're going to delve into this idea. Well, yes, that a soul that was originally human, that went into a non-human, could come back as a human. That too. And so we're going to look at this a bit more deeply and look at some of the primary sources on this idea, the idea of reincarnation in non-human form, because it's a little bit puzzling. We established last week that the whole idea of reincarnation from the Jewish perspective, from the perspective of the Kabbalists, of the Jewish mystics, is that it's not an endless cycle. It's not a pointless system where you just come and come back again and again and again forever. No. In Jewish reincarnation, it's very much focused on a point, on a mission. That every soul has a mission to bring into the world, has some impact you need to make, has a gift that you need to contribute to the world. And not just one, there could be many missions. But every soul needs to utilize all of its powers, all of its potentials in order to fulfill that mission. If you don't, if you came down in your lifetime, you spent energy, but you didn't spend it all. If there's soul energy that's left over, that you didn't utilize, you didn't actualize, you didn't fulfill, so then that leftover energy needs to come back. It's given a second chance. God in His mercy gives our soul another chance to do what we didn't do the first time, to try again. And so we're given a second chance with another soul, in the same soul in a different body, in different circumstances that are parallel to the one that we had first time. And this time you've got to get it right, you've got to fix it. So we understand how that would work with a human being. That coming back as a human means getting a second chance to do what you needed to do the first time. But coming back as a non-human, how does that work? If my soul is reincarnated in a sheep or a dog, so what am I supposed to do? My mission in my first lifetime as a human being surely would be different to what a sheep or a dog can achieve. And so how am I in my sheep form supposed to achieve what I didn't get done in my human form? How is being reincarnated in an animal a second chance? And if we take it a step further, what about if I'm reincarnated in a cucumber or a flower or lettuce or cabbage? What am I supposed to do then? I'm back as a cabbage. Now what? How am I supposed to fulfill that mission? If in my original life as a human being, maybe I was not charitable, I didn't give enough. Maybe I hurt somebody in my previous life. Whether it was a good that I didn't do or a bad thing that I actually did. We saw last week, for those two things you can be reincarnated. But now I'm a cabbage. What am I supposed to do? Donate myself to the good of I have no control over my destiny as a cabbage. So how can I fulfill the mission that I was unfulfilled the first time? What would be the point of it? And even going further than that, even inanimate objects, a rock, water, could have a reincarnated soul in it. What's a rock supposed to do? How does a rock fulfill a mission that was unfulfilled by a human being? So this is what we need to explore, how the Kabbalists explain the possibility of reincarnation in non-human form. What would be the point of it? And how would it work? And how does this affect us? We who currently are not cabbages or rocks or sheep, but we are currently in human form. We don't know what we were last time, but we know that we're currently a human being. How should my awareness be impacted? How should my behavior change in knowing that that cabbage roll or that woolen jumper or that glass of water may have reincarnated souls in it? And who knows, I might have known them. How should I differently react to that glass of water now? This will all be revealed as we delve into some of the fascinating stories and teachings of the great Kabbalists. Our point of takeoff on this topic will be from the Arizal Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, the great Kabbalist from Tzfat, from the 1500s, who he is perhaps the most prolific teacher of Kabbalah, and certainly in the area of reincarnation. And in one of his works, called Shara Mitzvahs, the Gate of the Commandments, where he explains the commandments of the Torah on a deeper level. In the parasha called Akev, in the book of Deuteronomy, he writes the following idea. I'm just going to translate, I'm going to read it to you in the English. I'm looking at the Hebrew text. I've got a bunch of Hebrew texts in front of me, but I'm just going to do them straight into simultaneous translation as I read them. So these are the words of the Arizal, that the souls of somebody who's done wicked, the soul of a wicked person or somebody who's done wicked things, are reincarnated after their death in all four levels of existence that there are, which are called in Hebrew Doimem, Somer, Chai, Medaber. The four levels of existence are: Doimem means the silent, Somer, the growing, Chai, the living, and Medaber, the speaking. The silent, the growing, the living, and the speaking, which we would translate them as the mineral world, that is the silent world, the vegetative world, which is the growing world, the animal world called the living, and the speaking is human. All four of these are identified as actually living, even though one of them is called the living, which is animals. All four are alive from a Kabbalistic perspective. Even the inanimate world is alive. The word inanimate is actually a misnomer. Inanimate from the Latin animus means a soul. Inanimate doesn't have a soul. So in English we also use that word inanimate. A rock is inanimate. It's actually not a correct term because a rock has a soul. It's alive. A rock is alive. They don't look all that lively, although some people don't either. But a rock is alive. Well, we today understand that a rock is constantly vibrating. There's heaps of movement in a rock. On an atomic level, there's stuff happening inside. Just because it doesn't jump and run around, but there is energy happening inside a rock. The Kabbalists couldn't have known that atomic knowledge, but they knew that a rock is alive. It has a life. It has a soul. But it's doimim, it's silent. It's motionless. Then there's the vegetative world called that which grows. Plants. There's the animal world which are fully alive, meaning they interact, they move around. And then there's the speaking species, which is the human being. We're the only one that speak. Other life forms maybe make noise, send out signals, but to communicate an idea, to converse, to reminisce, to think of the future and conceptualize into words things that are not in front of you, that's what speaking really is, and that's unique to human beings. And so says the Arizal that a person who has done wrong in one lifetime can be reincarnated in any of these levels: mineral, plant, animal, or human. And so, if somebody's reincarnated just one level down from human, which is an animal, so that's one type of reincarnation, but then somebody might be reincarnated 2 levels down, which is in the animal world. And so, when they need their correction, they need to go however many levels it is. If you went just down 1 level to an animal, you need to be lifted up 1 level into human. If you're reincarnated in a vegetable, you need to go up 2 levels from vegetable to animal to human. He'll explain. And some are reincarnated in the mineral world, and so therefore they need 3 steps to go up from the mineral to the plant to the animal to the human. Because that's the order that they will be elevated. So, if you're in mineral, let's say like water, so from that could sprout a plant. A plant grows from water, and the plant gets eaten by an animal. So then that which was a mineral has become a plant, and the plant has become an animal by being consumed by it. And then if that animal gets shechted, slaughtered according to Jewish law, and is then consumed by a person, so then it becomes a part of the human being. What you've eaten becomes a part of you. And then it has the chance to be corrected, because you can be elevated through being eaten.
What if it's not edible?
Okay. So what the Arizal here has introduced is the idea that the ecosystem that we have of every level eating, consuming, and living on the other levels actually has a spiritual meaning to it as well. That is not just a survival thing, but it's an elevation thing. There's a clear hierarchy here. There's a hierarchy of the inanimate at the bottom of the rung of the hierarchy, the plant level higher than that, the animal higher, and the human higher. And each level has the opportunity to elevate the one below it. So how does an inanimate object become elevated? Through soil providing nutrients for a plant, through water irrigating a plant. So then the soil and the water, which are inanimate, have provided life for the vegetative world. That vegetation, that plant now, can feed an animal. The cow's eating the grass. That is being elevated now to animal level. And that animal can then be eaten by a human being. And so the inanimate, the vegetable, and the animal have now all become a part of a human being. And now they have the opportunity to be elevated. Now, so far it would just seem that all you got to do is eat. Pretty easy. That just eat and you're elevating. So if I care for reincarnated souls, if I'm concerned for their welfare, I want to correct them. So let's go and eat a lot. The more I eat, the more I'm elevating. Sounds good. This could be used as a fantastic excuse for breaking every diet that you've ever had. That it's all very well to diet, but I've got to help all these souls. It's not fair. So I've got to be consuming more. So I will have a second piece of cake after all, because who knows what soul might be stuck in there. But that's not quite the case. That is the case as far as a vegetable utilizing the mineral world, or an animal consuming the vegetable world. All they've got to do is eat, and there's a step up. It's gone from one step to the other. But when it comes to human beings, our eating is not automatically an elevation. While the animal, or plant or mineral that you have eaten have now risen to human level, but that may not be enough to correct them, as we'll see. Now he says that sometimes you can skip a level. You don't have to go necessarily from one to the other. The mineral doesn't have to go through a plant and an animal to become human. It could skip. So, for example, if something is reincarnated in a vegetable, people eat vegetables. Not only animals eat vegetables, but people eat vegetables. And so, therefore, from the vegetable life, it's gone straight up to human life by being eaten by a human. And so too with the mineral world, that if an animal eats a mineral, or a human eats a mineral, so then it's jumped either 2 or 3 levels all at once. It's gone from mineral to animal, or mineral all the way to human. When a person drinks a cup of water. And so therefore you can jump 3 levels all at once. He explains with this that there's a very strange statement, seemingly strange statement in the Talmud. There's a rabbi who was a very holy man. His name is Rabbi Histor, and he made a statement. It's in the Talmud Tractate Shabbos, that Rabbi Histor said that when I was poor, I didn't eat vegetables, and when I was rich, I didn't eat vegetables. Why? Because by the time I fill myself with vegetables, what's the point? I would just eat meat instead. Which is a rather strange thing for a rabbi to say and to be recorded in the Talmud. So yeah, when I was poor, I didn't eat vegetables. When I was rich, I didn't eat vegetables. Why? Because I just ate meat. Why fill myself up with vegetables? To eat a meal of vegetables, you need to eat a lot. So I ate a bit of meat. That's all I needed to eat. So, okay, we know that those who do have vegetarian diets know you have to eat more to cover it. Meat is more satiating. And Rav Chisda is saying, so I didn't bother with the veggies. I just had a piece of meat and that was it. Well, why are you telling us this? Why do we need to know this? And why would that be recorded in the Talmud? We know the Talmud is full of statements of wisdom from the rabbis, or moral issues and lessons that we need to learn, but like their eating habits, not really interested what you had for lunch or what you don't like to eat. And what does it mean when I was poor, when I was rich? When I was poor, I didn't eat vegetables, and when I was rich, I didn't eat vegetables. What does he mean? So the Rizal explains this, that really he's talking about the reincarnated souls in the food that he's eating. And what he's saying is that to eat vegetables, you have to eat a lot of them to elevate souls, whereas eating an animal, you eat the animal and you're elevating a lot of vegetables with it. Because all the vegetables the animal ate, you're also elevating. So it's more of a wholesale elevation, that you're elevating many, many more souls by going to the top of the food chain rather than going further down the bottom. So what he meant to say was that when I ate, my eating had a mystical intention. I wasn't eating because I'm hungry, so I'm going to eat. Of course he's hungry, but that's not the purpose of his eating. The purpose of his eating was to elevate souls. He actually had that in mind. He had that intention. And so therefore, rather than eat a lot of vegetables to elevate souls, he ate a little bit of meat. And that was his intention of eating meat. But he also said both when I was poor and when I was rich, which we'll see what that means as we go on. So again, so far what we see is that eating is a form of elevating, of bringing up to the next level. But not just any old eating. There are different levels of different types of eating, as the Arizal continues. So based on this idea that souls can be reincarnated in all those levels of life, so therefore when a person eats, you have to be extremely careful. Don't eat like an animal eats, because that's not acceptable for a human being. An animal eats because they have an urge to eat, and that's it. There's no mindfulness or intention or higher purpose in the animal's consciousness. They're eating because they need to eat, and that's fine for an animal. It's not fine for a human being. Because an animal does not know the difference between good and evil, between what's holy, what's unholy. That's not their thing. They just do what is instinctive for them. So therefore, we find our sages have said a lot about the necessity to eat in a holy way. They compared the table that we eat at to the mizbeach, the altar in the temple. Just like there were sacrifices brought on the altar of animal, vegetable, and mineral, so too the table that we eat on is holy, like the altar. Why so? Because just like the altar was the place that elevated to the divine, the various levels of the world, animal, plant, and mineral, so too the table that we eat at is a place to elevate the food that we're eating. And so just like so the table in Jewish law has to be treated with a certain respect and honor. It's a holy place. So it also says that the table where we eat can bring forgiveness of sins. That when you eat, it can bring forgiveness of sins. Just like the altar in the temple, that sacrifices could earn forgiveness, so too the table where we eat can bring forgiveness of sins. Now, again, that's pretty cool. We know that fasting on Yom Kippur brings forgiveness of sins. Now we're told eating dinner brings forgiveness of sins. How so? Well, Yom Kippur is your sins, but eating at the table is to bring in forgiveness of the sins of the souls that are stuck in the food that you're eating. Because if you eat correctly, if you eat with the right mindset, so then you can bring a correction to those souls who are stuck in the animal, plant, or mineral world. It's their sins that can be forgiven. And how does one do that? By eating with the intent, the correct intent. There's a statement in the Ethics of Our Fathers, Pirkei Avos, that says that if 3 eat at a table and they don't say words of Torah, it's as if they ate from dead people's sacrifices. So is the statement. If 3 people, it says Shlosha Achu, if 3 eat at the table, or 3 sit at a table, and they don't say words of Torah, it's as if they ate from Zivchei Mesim, the offerings of the dead. Doesn't sound so appetizing. Whatever that is, it doesn't sound like a great meal. So the Baal Shem Tov, the great master of souls and the founder of the Hasidic movement, the Baal Shem Tov explained that what that means is that 3 who are eating at the table is referring to the 3 levels of existence. That you're sitting at the table, but you're not alone. There's 3 who are with you. There is the animal world, the plant world, and the mineral world. And they are at the table. But the thing is that they can't do what you can do. The thing that sets human beings apart from the other life forms is that we are able to do good. We are able to do acts of morality. We are able to be holy and bring ourselves up, elevate ourselves up to the heavens. That a human being is able to act in a way that is greater than our instincts, higher than our instincts, to do good. And so when we eat, we have to have in mind that the reason I'm eating, the purpose of my eating, is to fuel the goodness that I'm able to do in this world. If I don't eat, I don't have energy, I don't have power, I don't have alertness, my brain doesn't work, my body doesn't work. I need to eat. I'm dependent on that. But what I do with that fuel is up to me. That's my choice. Do I just live an indulgent, selfish life? So then, what have I helped the food that I've just eaten? What have I done to it? Where have I brought it? By living a selfish life. Whereas if I live a selfless, purposeful life of giving, of doing good, of bringing holiness into the world, of doing another mitzvah, another good deed, so then I am giving those other life forms a gift that they cannot give themselves. Because the chicken that I'm eating, or the cabbage that I'm eating, or the glass of water that I'm drinking, none of them are able to do a mitzvah. They can't do a good deed, a selfless deed. All they can do is what they are programmed to do. Water is just water. It can't do anything good. It provides good for others, but that's not a choice. It doesn't have any consciousness to do that. It's not aware of what it's doing or choosing what it does. So too a cabbage or a carrot or a parsley, it just does its thing. It grows, but where it goes, what it does, it has no choice. And a chicken too. A chicken is not able to be selfless or altruistic. Of course, animals have instincts, protective instincts, or they feed their young, but that's not a choice. That's an instinctive move. That is something they're programmed to do. They can't choose to do it differently. They can't choose to be kind or protective of a different species just for the sake of it. They maybe have that instinct to do it, but they can't choose to do it. Only a human being can do that. Can choose to do an act of goodness, of selflessness, that we're not programmed to do. On the other hand, only a human being can do an act of ugliness, of evil, of wanton cruelty. Only we can be mean. Animals can't. They can be vicious, but again, that's an instinct. They instinctively sometimes attack. They're programmed to do that, but they don't choose to do that. There's no wanton evil. An animal doesn't go out to hurt somebody, whereas a human being can. We can do the worst, the ugliest, the lowest of all species. That's within the human being capacity to do, and we can do the highest and most beautiful acts of goodness. So the Baal Shem Tov says that when three are sitting at the table, meaning you're eating with animals, plants, and minerals there on your plate, and you don't say words of Torah, you don't utilize the energy that's given to you to bring holiness into the world, words of Torah into the world, words of goodness into the world. If that's not what you're doing, so then you're eating the offerings of dead people. Do you know all the souls in this food that you're eating that are waiting to be elevated? Dead people. They died, but they've come back in the souls, their souls are stuck in the food that you're eating, and you're not doing anything. You're not elevating them. You're not saying words of Torah. You're not bringing holiness into the world. That's the offerings of the dead. So, specifically it says that three that sit at the table and don't say words of Torah. You don't speak words of Torah, because speaking, as we said earlier, is the unique power of the human being. To say words of beauty, to express. An animal can send out a signal, but can't express themselves, whereas a human being can. And if you use that power of expression, but you don't use it for something holy, for something purposeful, so then you've ruined it. The whole chain of all the species, each one was moving up the chain to come to the human being, so you would use your speech for holiness. And if you don't do that, the disappointment that crashes down on all these life forms that were waiting for you to correct them is beyond what we can imagine. So this is why our sages said that you need to work really hard to make sure that the energy that you're taking in from those lower life forms is then utilized in what a human is unique and able to do, and that is to do good. And that is the intention of eating. When you have that in mind when you eat, it is an elevation of those life forms. So therefore, the Arizal says that somebody who lives a wicked life, a selfish life, a life ignorant of holiness, so not only are you not fixing the souls that are reincarnated in those lower forms, on the contrary, that you're making their lot worse. You're dragging them down. Because in animal form, they can't do bad. But in human form, if you're doing evil and you've eaten them, so then you're dragging them down further. So this is the awareness and consciousness that a person has to have when eating. For this reason, he says, sometimes people's moods change after they've eaten. There are some people I know who are in a bad mood until they eat. And then they're in a better mood after they've eaten. Can't think of who, but there are certain people are like that. But here it's saying deeper than that. That sometimes you can be totally transformed after eating. Suddenly, that you eat and then you move in a certain direction. And it could be either way. A person could become better, a more refined person after eating, or the opposite. A very ugly urge may arise after eating. Well, you've just eaten another level of life, whether it be animal, plant, or mineral. In that could be reincarnated a soul. And that soul's stuck there for a reason. And so when you took it in, there could be quite an evil soul in there. There may be someone who needs real fixing in that food that you ate. The chicken wasn't evil. It was a lovely chicken. But there's a soul stuck in it that is evil. And when you ate it, your job was to fix that soul. But if you ate it in a selfish way, if you just gobbled it down with your own indulgence in mind, and not intending to utilize that energy for anything positive or holy, to further goodness in the world, but just to do your own thing, which may be quite negative, so then you're not elevating it, it's drawing you down, and you're affected by that.
So when somebody eat like they possess, they probably are.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yep. So the act of eating can actually draw you down. Interestingly, it says here also that the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzchak Lurie, who was studying his words, he instructed his students that when you go to a river and you want to drink, so he said, don't bend down and put your mouth in the river to drink from the river, but cup your hands and draw the water out to drink from the river. Now, this idea is actually mentioned in the Talmud, that you shouldn't drink straight out of the river, but you should cup your hands and take water out, because you might swallow a leech.
Ugh. Yeah.
Which would be rather unpleasant. But Arizal says that that's actually talking about a deeper idea. It actually has mystical significance. What's the difference between bending down and drinking out of the river, or cupping your hands and drinking out of your hands? What in the end, what's the difference? Both times you're getting the water. Mm-hmm. So why is that animalistic and this human? Because yes, that when you bend down to drink, so you're going down to it. When you cup and lift it, then you're bringing it up to you. And that is the correct way to consume, to eat, is to elevate. That I'm bringing it up to me, not I'm going down to it. If I am consumed by it, by the eating, then I'm not consuming it, it's consuming me.
And in the process, you're actually coincidentally washing your hands as well.
True. But the risk of swallowing a leech means, on a mystical level, that you could swallow the negative soul that may be reincarnated in the water and then become sick from it. On a spiritual level, it affects you. Whereas if you're bringing it up to you, so then whatever soul, troubled soul, is reincarnated in that water, but you're bringing it up, you're elevating it because you're drinking in order to irrigate, to energize your powers of doing good, of positive, of lifting it to the human, not going down to it. So suddenly every morsel we eat, everything we drink, this water on the table, has taken a whole new meaning, that we're elevating souls left, right, and center. The food we're eating is an act of correction, where we're correcting a soul that can't do it itself. The soul stuck in the food can't elevate itself. But what we can do is give it the gift of elevation by eating it in a holy way, for a holy purpose, and utilizing its energy for good. Now,
So what happens after you eat with that particle of the soul?
we'll see. We'll see what happens. Now, of course, we don't eat everything. Not all animals, plants, and minerals are edible. Many are not. And certainly, from a Jewish perspective, there's kosher animals and non-kosher animals. So, could there be a human soul reincarnated in a non-kosher animal? And if so, how do we help it? Here we were all excited about this new license to eat and elevate and help the world by eating a bit more. Okay, we have to do it with holy intentions, but now eating is a holy act. But what about those poor animals that are not kosher? Can they be elevated? So there's an interesting story, the Baal Shem Tov, I mentioned earlier, the founder of the Hasidic movement. 300 years ago he lived. He was the ultimate soul doctor. He could see people's previous incarnations just by looking at them. He could see what people needed to do to correct their souls. And he went around actively trying to fix souls. Spent his whole life doing that. So he was once on one of his journeys, as he often went, and he stopped at an inn to stay the night, a Jewish innkeeper, and he chose this particular place. And the innkeeper was very overjoyed that the Baal Shem Tov himself, this holy rabbi, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem, was staying in his inn. He was extremely honored by his presence. And so the innkeeper said, I want to give you a gift. I want to give you anything you want of my possessions. I want to give you as a gift. And so the Baal Shem Tov said, yeah, really, anything? He said, anything. So Baal Shem Tov started walking around his property, and he went out to the stables outside the inn, and he pointed to an extremely big, strong horse. And the Baal Shem Tov said, I'd love that horse. So the innkeeper said, anything but the horse. That horse is my prize horse. This horse works like 5 horses. Everything I do, I need this horse. I'll give you 5 other horses, but this horse I actually can't give. Baal Shem Tov says, okay, I'll find something else, no problem. So he keeps walking around. He goes into the inn, and he points to a bunch of books. He says, what are all these books you have here? So he said that these are my ledger books of loans that I've given out. That the innkeeper was quite wealthy, and he was like the local banker in the village. People would borrow money from him, and they would pay him back later. He had these ledger books. So the Baal Shem Tov said, okay, so maybe I can take one of the loans. I'll choose a loan to become mine. They have to pay me back instead of you. So the innkeeper said, with pleasure. So he picks a ledger off the shelf, and he starts flicking through, looking at the loans, and he sees a loan of quite a sizable sum. The Baal Shem Tov said, this loan, I would like to take this loan. Could this be mine? So the innkeeper looks at it and laughs. He said, you're welcome to take it, but it's worthless. So, why? He said, the person I lent that money to many years ago, he died penniless, with no heirs. I'm never going to get that loan back. It's worthless. The Baal Shem Tov said, I want it. Can I have this loan? He said, sure, you can have it if you want it. So Baal Shem Tov tore that page out of the ledger, and it became his. He scrunched it up and he threw it into the fireplace. So the innkeeper saw this and thought, this is a little bit strange. Until he heard some noises outside in the stable. And he ran out to see that his prize horse died at that moment. And with great shock, he didn't know what was going on. Baal Shem Tov said, let me explain. the soul of the man who owed you money was reincarnated in your horse. And he left this world with a debt that he couldn't repay. And so he had to repay it. So your horse worked for you so loyally to repay your debt. But I saw that the time had come for that soul to be released. It had done enough work. It had paid back the debt. So I forgave his debt, and the soul has gone to rest. So here's another way that a soul could actually be elevated. In this case, the animal, in a way, did its own job. By serving its debtor, the one that he owed the money to, the soul was released, was corrected. So not necessarily do we need to eat something to elevate it. There are other ways for it to be elevated. The question is, did that horse know this? This horse was working so hard. Did the horse know that it had to work for this guy to pay back a debt? Was that why the horse was so energized? The horse knew. Why else was it working so hard? It seems pretty strange. Was the horse aware of what it was doing? So to answer that, I want to read you something fascinating from another great mystical thinker. His name was Rav Moshe Teitelbaum, known as the Yisbach Moshe, which is the title of his great work. He lived about 200 years ago or so in the city or village of Ihel in Hungary. And he was the progenitor of the great Teitelbaum family in the Hasidic world. And he was a great mystical thinker. He speaks about the reincarnation in animal form and how it's different to human reincarnation. And this is what he says. It says in the books of true wisdom, Chachmei HaEmes, which is a way to say the Kabbalistic works, that a soul that is reincarnated in human form, a person that came back as a person, doesn't know and doesn't remember anything from its previous lifetime, and doesn't know why it came back. And it doesn't know who it was in the previous life. But a soul that is reincarnated in animal form, those animals that do not speak, that can't express themselves, that soul knows. It remembers who it was last time. It knows what it did wrong last time, and knows what it needs to do this time. So it says in the works of Kabbalah. So we, you, me, present company, in human form, we've been here before, but we just don't remember that. We don't know why we're back. We don't know who we were last time, and we don't know what we did wrong, or what we didn't do right, or what our mission is. We're just here, and that's it.
And what about people who do remember or bring it up with the reincarnation therapy? They make it up, or it's
I don't know. I can only tell you what the Kabbalists have told us, that there are Kabbalists who are able to see these things, but that we can access it, not so sure. Not so sure.
Are there cases where we, like being human, is the first time that soul is born?
There are new souls, but they're very few and far between today. The Arizal said 500 years ago there are hardly any new souls. So we've been here before. So we don't know who we were, but the animals do. They know that they are human souls, and they know who they were last time, and they know why they're there. Now he gives a reason. Why is it that animals know and we don't? So he gives two reasons. He says one reason is a scientific reason, And one reason is a logical reason or a systemic reason. We'll see what that means. So the first reason he says, the reason why a human soul doesn't remember its previous reincarnation, whereas an animal that has a human soul does remember, is because a human soul that enters into a human body, the body and soul become one. The soul identifies with the body, the new body. And by so doing, it forgets its previous lifetime. Because the soul and body match. It's a human soul in a human body. But a human soul in an animal body is not a match. It doesn't fit. Because a human soul has all these various potentials and powers and abilities that an animal doesn't have. So all those abilities can't be expressed in an animal's body. It just doesn't fit. Because it doesn't fit, it doesn't fully land in the animal body. And therefore it has one foot out. It remembers where it came from. So a human soul in a human body is a good fit, and therefore you identify with your current body, and that makes you forget anything you were before. Whereas a human soul in an animal body, because it doesn't really fit, it sort of hovers above the body a little bit. So it's still aware. It doesn't totally identify with the animal, and therefore it remembers who it was before. Its previous identity is still in its consciousness. That's the scientific, he calls the natural reason why an animal reincarnation remembers, whereas a human reincarnation, meaning a human in a human, doesn't remember, whereas a human in an animal does. And then there's a systemic reason, meaning that there's a reason why it has to be this way. Not just it is this way because it just doesn't work. It's not just that the animal happens to remember it was a human because the body and soul don't fit, but there's a reason why it has to be this way. And this is fascinating. He says, because God's wisdom declared that being that the idea of having free will and free choice is unique to the human being. So therefore, those who are reincarnated in animal form, who are not able to express in speech, it cannot be that the reincarnation is for the animal to correct itself with its own free choice, because it has no free choice. So anything that an animal does is what it must do by its instinct. So the reason why a soul is reincarnated in animal form, if it can't fix itself because it doesn't have free choice to choose to do something, is more like a form of cleansing for that soul. It's a correction, but it's not a fixing that they can do through choice. It is more like that the human soul should rest in an animal body where it doesn't fit, it's discomfort, it's uncomfortable, it doesn't fit there, and that should be a cleansing for that soul. In other words, when you're a human soul with human potential, but you're in an animal body, there's no greater frustration than that. Because a human has so much it can do, but in the shape of an animal, it can't do that. Because you can't do an act of goodness. You can't do something with free choice. You're stuck to follow the instincts of an animal. It can't think any bigger, any higher than that. And that is extremely painful. There's nothing more frustrating than having potentials that you cannot actualize. Yeah, but worse. Because a human disability still can express those powers sometimes in other ways. There's sometimes a way to express it. In animal, there's no way. But it is a similar idea. And so, the frustration of being a human soul in an animal body is itself a cleansing. Because why are you reincarnated in the first place? Because you were a human. You had a chance as a human being. but you didn't utilize it. You have all these gifts, you had this goodness that you had to bring to the world, but you didn't. You didn't do it as a human being. You wasted your time playing video games, and you weren't bringing goodness into the world. So now you've been reincarnated, and we learned last week, you get a couple of chances as a human to fix it this time. This time you got to do it. And if after 3 times in human form, you still didn't bring the goodness into the world, so then we're going to send you into the animal form for you to experience the frustration of knowing that you're a human, knowing that you have unbelievable capacities, and now you can't fulfill it. Now you can't utilize them. Because you're in an animal, you're stuck with the limitations of an animal. So this, he says, the Yismach Moshe says, is why you have to remember who you were. You have to remember your previous life to experience that frustration. If you think you're just an animal, so then it's fine. Because for an animal to be an animal is fine. There's nothing wrong for a chicken being a chicken or a sheep being a sheep. But for a person to be a chicken, that's not how it's supposed to be. That's frustrating. So therefore, you have to remember it. You have to know who you were to feel the frustration of who you are now. You didn't use your energies when you had the chance, so now feel what it's like to not be able to use those energies and know it. So therefore, the animal remembers who it was before.
Just an animal or vegetables and minerals?
So it seems that would also apply to vegetables and minerals as well. They also have an awareness. And so then, we could say, so then what's the use of that? Is this just punishment? We're just saying that God is just saying, you didn't utilize your energies, so now you're going to feel what it's like to not be able to utilize your energies. And that's it? Just for the pain of that? He says no. He says, because then, there's a certain amount of time that soul will have to spend in that animal body. But if it merits to reach a correction and will enter into a human body, so then as a human, your mission is to correct yourself, is to do your own effort. The animal can't do it themselves, but the human can correct them. And that's not a punishment. Human reincarnation is not a punishment, but is an opportunity to fix. Human reincarnation?
It depends what life you're reincarnated into.
But in human form, you can always affect your own correction. You can fix it because you're a human being. So whatever reason you're reincarnated for, you can do good to make it better, whereas the animal can't. So the animal is dependent on us to correct it, but the human can do it themselves. So therefore, in human form, we don't remember our previous incarnation. We don't remember what we were before. Because if we would remember it, he says here, if we remember what we went through previously, then we would actually lose our free choice. If you knew why you were reincarnated, if you knew what you did wrong last time or what you have to fix this time, you'd have to do it. You'd have to do the right thing. You're not going to be that foolish to make the same mistake again. That would actually take away your free choice. And that would defeat the whole purpose, because the whole purpose of being a human is to do good by choice. So therefore, what you were in a previous life is hidden from you, is concealed from you. So you should maintain the free choice. So maybe I don't have to be nice to this person. Maybe I should be mean to them. They deserve it. Well, if you knew that in a previous lifetime you hurt that person, and you've come down into this lifetime just to do an act of kindness to that person, to fix what you did before, then you would have no free choice. Of course you'd do it. But because we don't know, so we're constantly making moral choices. Maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I have to, maybe I don't have to. And therefore, when we do the good, it's through free choice, and that can correct us. And so he says, like the Talmud says, that before we're born, there's an angel that teaches us the entire Torah when we're in the womb. And there's a light that shines that allows us to see from one end of the world to the other. This is when we're in the womb. Meaning, we're taught the entire Torah, all the wisdom, all the divine wisdom is given to us when we're in the womb. We know everything. And we can see with a light from one end of the world to the other, which means we know who we were in a previous life. We know where we need to go in this lifetime. We know exactly what our mission is. This is before you're born. In the womb, it's all clear to us. We've got all the wisdom we need. We've got the direction. We know exactly what we need to correct. We know where we're coming from. We've got all the information. But then the Talmud says, just before you're born, the angel taps you on the lip and makes you forget everything. You forget it all. And so you're born and you're just a little baby. And you grow up and you're still a little baby. And you don't know what you're in this world for. And one sec. So why is that? Because we need free choice. If we know what we have to do, we wouldn't have free choice. If we knew what we have to correct, so then we would do it. We could not do it. And then we wouldn't have free choice. So then, why were we taught it? Why were we given that information? Why are we taught something to forget? Because you don't really forget. You forget in the conscious level of your mind, it's forgotten, it's lost. But it's imprinted in the depth of your soul. All that wisdom that you had in the womb, you still have it. It's not accessible on the forefront of your mind, but in the depths of your soul, it's all imprinted there. What your mission is, what you have to do in this world, it is there. You just don't consciously know it. And your experience that you may have had in a previous incarnation as a non-human, if you were stuck in that chicken or carrot or glass of water or rock, the unpleasantness of having a soul that has so much potential and can't actualize that potential, that experience is also implanted in your soul. You've been made to forget it, but it's still there somewhere. And so, therefore, in this lifetime, you're going to have an added determination. I've got to utilize my powers. I've got to do everything I can to fulfill my mission, to bring goodness to the world, to do that extra mitzvah, that challenging deed that is in front of me now that I need to choose right or wrong. There's something in your soul pushing you to do it because the experience, though forgotten on a conscious level, has made a major impact on your soul. So what we've seen is how in human form, this is where the action is. The rest of creation is waiting for us, depending on us. Because the mineral, the plant, and the animal cannot elevate itself. They can't ruin the world like humans can, and they can't fix the world like humans can. And so every single sip of water we take, every single meal that we eat, even snacks between meals, there are souls waiting to be elevated. Why were you in the mood of that food at that time? Why did you have this sudden craving to eat this? You think it's because you always crave for these things, or because you like chocolate, but it's because there's a soul in there begging for you to elevate it. And so your craving was your soul responding to the call of that soul, saying, please eat me and use my energy for holiness. It doesn't work if you just binge eat. You're not elevating the souls. But if you're eating to energize yourself to do another good deed, if the three that are sitting at your table, the plants, the animals, and the minerals that are sitting at your table, that are calling out to you, if you eat them and then you say words of Torah, holy words, if you do something holy with that energy, so then the whole world is elevated with you. Okay, questions, comments?
This question.
Yeah.
If every time that you why do they need to be rethought everything if the soul knows stuff already?
Okay, that's a great question. A reincarnated soul does need to be retaught the Torah. It's got it imprinted from previously. So it also forgot it previously, so it has to be refreshed, certainly a refresher. But also, it has to be taught the wisdom as it needs it for now, for this lifetime. Because even though the wisdom is the same, but the application of that wisdom will be different for this particular lifetime that it's about to go into. So it's taught the wisdom that it needs to know now.
So people who are born prematurely, they're fast learners.
Correct. They've got the lessons already.
Is that true?
Yeah. You're not born till you know everything.
7 weeks pregnant.
So yeah, you picked it up quick.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between like the spark of holiness that's in food, that like when you make a bracha, you're supposed to uplift? Is that different to the soul that?
Okay. So yes and no. The bracha, the blessings that we make on food, have a dual purpose because the eating has a dual purpose. There are sparks of holiness in all of creation, sparks of divine energy that need to be elevated, activated by us, utilizing them for holy purpose. So any food that we eat, whether or not it has a reincarnated soul in it, any food has sparks of divine energy that need to be redeemed, elevated, and brought up. And so, therefore, everything we eat, we are elevating the same way, and the blessing that you make by mentioning God's name over the food, that is a way to ignite that spark, to activate it, and then the eating and utilizing it for holiness is bringing it up, is giving it its sublimation. So that's true of all food. So the Arizal actually says in that section that there's two separate mystical intentions of eating. One of them is to elevate sparks that are there from creation, from the time it created, the divine energy invested in creation. And the other is to elevate souls that have been reincarnated along the way in that food. And so, but the food that we end up eating, the food that comes on our plate, is very likely to have souls that we need to correct. That's why it ended up in our plate.
What if you don't finish that though and it gets thrown away? What happens
Okay.
to that soul?
Interesting. So we know that there's a law called Bal Tashchis, you shouldn't waste food. And we now understand why on a deeper level. It's not just the wastefulness of it, or because kids are starving in Africa, like we were told when we were kids. That's also true. We shouldn't waste food. It's a wrong thing. But apart from that, there's a soul in there. You can't just throw it away. But interestingly, the definition of wasting means wasting. Eating something that you don't want is also wasting, right? So eating more than you can eat, that's also a form of wastage. You should eat as much as you can eat. If there is edible food that can be utilized, that should be put aside. If not, scraps from the side. So then that's a sign that that's not needed to be elevated in this form at this moment. So the food your appetite determines also how much sparks you can elevate at this time. Some of it may be for later, and some of it may be for some different form in its compost or wherever it's going to go.
How does it get elevated in the rubbish? If it gets thrown away, it's thrown away.
Goes back
Well,
to the land.
well, it depends. What happens next to it? Where does it go
Back
next?
to the mineral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody did really badly.
Same as even worse than that is if somebody ate it without the intention. That's even worse, because now that food has to go through a whole cycle to get elevated. Yep.
Two questions. The words of Torah is, to your point, the actual bracha in itself, can that actually be considered the word of Torah, or do you have to sit there and do an actual word as you're eating kind of?
So, the blessing before the food, it sort of activates, switches on the spark of holiness and express an intention. The blessing after food is even more powerful in a way, because that you've just been energized by the food and now you're blessing God with the energy that you just received. That's why the blessing before food is a one-liner. The blessing after food, particularly the benching, the grace afterwards, is quite a long thing, because you've just eaten, so you've got to use some energy for holiness. And it's interesting that the custom is to say a chapter of Psalms of Tehillim before the benching Shir Amalas or Alaras Baravel, just a chapter. That is words of Torah as well. That can be considered words of Torah. But it's preferable that to put something meaningful in the conversation, the table conversation, that actually is even more powerful to elevate the food.
And thank you. And when you talk about three people, is that I'm using it as a metaphor? So that is
Yeah, the Baal Shem Tov understood it.
Three people.
Yeah, the Baal Shem Tov understood it as the three, and it's you with animal, plant, and mineral.
All right, cool. And you got a couple of good questions.
Come back, yeah.
So, if you can only elevate the souls with words of Torah, what happens to food eaten by non-Jews, and what happens to non-kosher food that you can't?
Okay, great question. So obviously here we're discussing the power of the Jewish soul to elevate. Of course, a non-Jew elevates through eating and consuming and living a moral life, as was expected from them. There's an added power that the Jewish soul has, that because we have the power of Torah and the mitzvahs, that elevates it in an even more powerful way. But yes, the non-Jew elevates through living a moral life, and therefore they also elevate the non-kosher world. But for the power to elevate on the level of Torah, a non-kosher food is inaccessible in that way. Through eating it, it doesn't get lifted, you get degraded by it. So therefore that is untouchable through eating. We can't elevate it that way. By not eating it, we elevate it.
So a Jewish soul couldn't end up as a pig?
Well, it could. That would be a pretty bad reincarnation. Yeah, the family wouldn't be so proud of that one. But
Because then nobody's
right.
bracha
But
over that.
correct. So there's no bracha. But the non-eating of it elevates it. Although interestingly, there is a concept that something non-kosher could be elevated even by eating. If somebody ate non-kosher, they did the wrong thing. They weren't supposed to. They did. This is what happened, and they regret it later, and they repent, and they truly have remorse. The power of repentance is that it can take something that was otherwise unelevatable and bring it to holiness. Because sometimes when we've gone to the side of unholy and we come back with even more strength. So therefore, even the non-kosher can be elevated through eating. Another way is through certain halachic means. If a non-kosher ingredient fell accidentally into a kosher food, so there's a rule called 1 in 60. That if it's less than 1/60th of the total, it becomes nullified to the total. You can't do this intentionally. You can't put non-kosher food into kosher pot. But if it happened, if it fell in, so then it becomes nullified. And that's one of the ways. Why would such a thing happen? I'm cooking a kosher pot. Why would something not kosher fall in? How's it possible? How can we? Because sometimes there is a spark, maybe a Jewish soul stuck in something non-Jewish, not non-kosher, that somehow falls in and slips into kosher that way.
Sneaks in.
And so therefore, there was one mystic, the Bnei Yisachar, Reb Tzvi Elimelech of Dinov. He said that we shouldn't be stricter than Jewish law in keeping kosher. If Jewish law says something's kosher, you shouldn't say, well, I'm going to be stricter. Because,
But a lot of people do that. They're more machmir than...
well, it has to be within Jewish law. You can be strict within the law, but you can't say something that is 100% kosher and you're going extra, saying I'm going to be extra kosher than what kosher is. Because if it's 100% kosher, then the fact that there's a possibility of non-kosher in it, that needs to be elevated. And so if 1/60th has fallen in, I'm going to say, I'm not going to eat it because even though 1/60th is nullified, I don't want to... No, you should, because you're elevating something that needs to fall in there.
One more question. You know, like in Croatia's very human life appeared last.
Mm-hmm.
So all these, the earth, the trees, the animals, everything was created before. So obviously there were all these souls, which I presume non-human,
Mm-hmm.
were, populating this world
Yep.
before the human soul became available.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously these other souls, they originally were non-human, or they had to go through the whole cycle?
Yes,
and then
yeah, the original animals were all just animals, and that's why Adam was not allowed to eat them. Adam was not allowed to eat the animals because there was no elevation of souls at that stage. Only after the flood, Noah was told you're allowed to eat animals now. And the reason was because the corruption of the first 10 generations, now the animals were full of human souls reincarnated, so now there was a necessity to start eating the animals to elevate them. So only from Noah onwards.
But he was allowed to eat fruit, except for one particular one.
Yeah.
So the fruit also had soul.
So yeah. So in that case, not necessarily, like we said before, not necessarily do all foods have souls in them.
Mm-hmm.
But so he still needed to elevate the vegetative world. It says that vegetation had already needed correction from the beginning of creation.
The apple.
Yeah, the tree of knowledge. So that needed to be elevated, but the animal world only after the flood.
What happens once the soul has been elevated and it's completed its mission?
So then it can go up to the heavenly realms. It doesn't have to come back down. It can go to its ultimate rest or its higher places, its source back home.
But if there are no new souls and there's so many people and so many things,
Nobody's up there, you think?
right? Like that's what I'm asking.
So
It's a bit longer there.
So yes, so this we touched on before that the reincarnation is not a repeat of the same soul coming back down. It's the unused portion, the unfulfilled portion of a soul comes back down. So in any one lifetime, you've fulfilled much of your mission. You've done many good deeds, so that goes up. The unfinished portion of the soul comes back down, and that has a new identity. So a reincarnation is not the same old person just back again. It's a new configuration of the leftover parts, unused parts of the soul that come back and fix this time. But the other part of the soul moves upwards.
And also, you know what they say when the angel touches it, that's why we have this here. But why do non-Jews have it?
Because non-Jews also taught wisdom, the Torah that applies to them. There are 7 commandments that apply to all humankind, and there's wisdom that applies to all. So they are taught their wisdom that applies to their souls, and we're taught ours. So they also have
And the same angel.
same angel. I assume there's one angel that does that. Yeah,
Right.
It's a full-time job.
yeah, that's right.
Running around the
It's the lost.
Okay.